the candles guttered in midnight draughts that swept through Medmenham Abbey, casting writhing shadows across walls that had once echoed with monastic prayers. Now, in the dying years of the 18th century, those ancient stones harbored very different rituals. Through torchlit corridors, figures moved in monks' robes, not holy men, but England's nobility playing at sacrilege. They called themselves the Order of the Friars of St. Francis of Wykeham, but history would know them by a darker name, the Hellfire Club. In the flickering darkness of a vaulted chamber, Sir Francis Dashwood raised a golden chalice, his face a mask of mock piety. Around him, members of Britain's elite politicians, aristocrats, artists participated in ceremonies that mocked the church and celebrated excess. The wine flowed freely, and with it loosened not just tongues, but the very fabric of 18th century propriety. What truly happened in those shadowed rooms would become the stuff of legend, whispered about in London's coffee houses and parliamentary corridors. The Hellfire Clubs of the 1700s represented more than mere debauchery. They were a dark mirror held up to the Age of Enlightenment, reflecting its contradictions and hypocrisy. In an era that prized reason and proper conduct, these secret societies offered release valves for society's repressed impulses. Their members were not society's outcasts, but its leaders. Men like Sir Francis Dashwood, who would serve as Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, and John Montagu, 4th Earl of Sandwich, whose name would become immortalized in culinary history. The origins of these infamous clubs trace back to the early 1700s, when the first Hellfire Club was established in London by Philip, Duke of Wharton. A notorious rake and political provocateur, Wharton created a society that openly mocked religion and morality. His club meetings, held in various London taverns, attracted attention for their blasphemous toasts and satirical ceremonies. The authorities, concerned about the club's influence, shut it down in 1721, but the seed had been planted. It was Sir Francis Dashwood who would perfect the formula, establishing his own Hellfire Club in the 1740s. He chose as his headquarters the ruins of Medmenham Abbey, a former Cistercian monastery on the banks of the Thames. The setting was deliberately provocative, a sacred space repurposed for profane activities. Dashwood had the abbey renovated, adding classical statuary and Gothic touches that emphasized its new role as a temple of pleasure. The membership roster read like a who's who of 18th century Britain. Besides Dashwood and Montagu, it included John Wilkes, the radical journalist and politician, Benjamin Franklin during his time in London, and various other members of Parliament and aristocracy. They styled themselves as monks of their unholy order, adopting pseudonyms and wearing ceremonial robes during their meetings. These gatherings combined elements of ancient mystery cults, folk magic, and deliberate blasphemy. The abbey's walls were decorated with erotic classical artwork and pagan symbols. The motto, "Do what thou wilt," was inscribed above the entrance, predating Aleister Crowley's similar maxim by more than a century. Members would arrive by boat, often accompanied by guests, usually women from London's higher-class brothels, dressed as nuns for their elaborate ceremonies. The true nature of these ceremonies remains shrouded in mystery. Contemporary accounts speak of black masses, occult rituals, and orgies, but how much of this was reality and how much was rumor is impossible to determine. What is known is that the meetings combined libertine philosophy with theatrical mockery of religious rites. Wine would be drunk from chalices, prayers would be said backwards, and various acts of blasphemy would be performed. But beneath the surface of mere hedonism lay deeper currents of political and philosophical rebellion. Many club members were involved in the period's radical politics. John Wilkes used the club's connections to advance his campaigns for press freedom and parliamentary reform. Benjamin Franklin's presence suggests that serious discussions of liberty and governance occurred alongside the revelry. The psychological appeal of the Hellfire Club to its elite membership reveals much about the period's social pressures. These were men who, in their public lives, had to maintain rigid standards of propriety and religious observance. The club offered them a space where these restrictions could be safely transgressed. It was rebellion without risk, or so they thought. Rumors of darker activities persisted. Stories circulated of members practicing black magic, of sacrificial rituals, of deaths covered up by powerful connections. While no murders were ever proven, several mysterious deaths were linked to club members over the years. The remote abbey, with its underground chambers and secret passages, certainly provided ample opportunity for concealment. The club's activities eventually attracted too much attention. A series of scandals in the 1760s forced Dashwood to scale back the meetings. The political careers of several members were damaged by their association with the club. John Wilkes was forced into exile after publishing inflammatory materials, though he would later return triumphantly to Parliament. Yet the legend of the Hellfire Club grew larger in public imagination than the reality ever was. It became a symbol of aristocratic excess and moral corruption, featured in Gothic novels and political satires. The ruins of Medmenham Abbey became a tourist attraction, with visitors hoping to glimpse evidence of the infamous gatherings. Modern historians have attempted to separate fact from fiction in the Hellfire Club story. While the basic outline is clear wealthy men engaging in taboo behavior in a converted abbey, many details remain disputed. The club's secrecy, combined with the tendency of both supporters and critics to exaggerate, makes definitive accounts impossible. The socio-political context of the Hellfire Club reveals much about 18th century Britain. It was an era of increasing social mobility and changing moral standards, when ancient privileges were being challenged by new money and new ideas. The club's membership reflected these changes, combining old aristocracy with self-made men like Franklin. The Hellfire Club's influence extended beyond its immediate era. It inspired similar societies throughout Europe and America, and its blend of occultism, politics, and sexuality would influence later organizations like the Ordo Templi Orientis. The image of powerful men meeting in secret to perform forbidden rituals has become a persistent theme in conspiracy theories and popular culture. What remains most fascinating about the Hellfire Club is not what definitely occurred within its walls, but what might have occurred, the possibilities suggested by the combination of power, secrecy, and transgression. In the candle-lit chambers of Medmenham Abbey, the restraints of the Age of Reason were deliberately cast aside, revealing the shadows that lurked beneath the Enlightenment's rational surface. Today, the ruins of Medmenham Abbey still stand, though little remains of Dashwood's modifications. Tourists still visit, trying to imagine what took place in those now silent rooms. The Hellfire Club serves as a reminder that human nature often requires outlets for its darker impulses, and that power and privilege can create spaces where normal rules cease to apply, for better or worse.